Welcome to the Global Journalism Seminars. This is The Briefing. It's been a month since the Financial Times announced a landmark deal with OpenAI to allow its content to be used in training their models. Other major news organizations, including Reuters and the Associated Press, are also collaborating with AI companies to leverage their archives while ensuring proper compensation and attribution for their content. Increasingly, media managers are also exploring new AI capabilities tailored for their newsrooms. These include advanced audience data analysis tools and automated content generation features that might enhance journalistic workflows. A Reuters Institute survey of 314 media leaders in 56 countries asked how they ranked the importance of implementing various AI uses in their company in 2024. 56% said back-end automation would be very important, 36% said it would be somewhat important, and 7% said it was not very important. Our guest today is Dr Bahareh Heravi, a reader in AI and media at the University of Surrey's Institute for People-Centered AI. Dr Bahareh specializes in the intersection of AI and media, particularly in the realm of data and computational journalism. She also co-founded the European Data and Computational Journalism Conference and is currently undertaking a BRAID Fellowship to work with the BBC on refining responsible AI adoption plans in their newsroom. We'll ask about the challenges, ethics, and opportunities of integrating AI into journalistic practices. That's The Briefing. Let's begin. Hello and welcome to the Global Journalism Seminars. We are about halfway through the term and looking like we're halfway through a term. So thank you very much for joining us today. I'm very excited to introduce you to Dr. Bahareh, whose work we were very impressed by in Italy and continue to be impressed by. I've seen a little preview of the presentation you're going to give, and you're my kind of presentation person. So I already know this is going to be good. Dr. Bahareh, tell us a little bit about what's happening in terms of the BBC partnership. That's still being inked, is that right?
That's right. Hello. Yes, the BBC partnership and the fellowship has just started. The initial contracts have been signed, and now the kind of partner agreements between the organizations are being worked on. And I'm really looking forward to actually properly start the project and see where we will get to.
Yeah, brilliant laboratory for this kind of testing to see what works and doesn't work.
Absolutely.
All right, I'm going to shut up and hand over to you because I'm very interested to hear. And we will, please feel free to add your questions to the Q&A box. We'll be back for questions in about 30 minutes. Take it away.
Great, thank you. So I'll share my slides and just, yeah, is this the right window?
Looking good, yep.
Okay, excellent. So good afternoon to everyone. I'm very pleased to be here. As Kathleen kindly introduced me, my name is Bahareh Heravi, and I'm at the Institute for People-Centered AI at the University of Surrey. I'm also recently a BBC BRAID Fellow with the BBC, and I'm going to very briefly talk about that at the very end of my presentation. So I'm going to just jump right into it. Today I'll talk about AI in the newsroom and how AI is basically changing the newsrooms or how it is being used in the newsroom. So I'm going to go back to data and how we have basically got here. The story is, we all know, so much data is being generated on a daily basis. So much data is being recorded compared to around maybe 10 years ago that we were using data or recording and generating data. And so much of this data is now accessible to us that as journalists, we can use and write stories about or kind of use as the basis of our investigations. And this has led into a kind of new types of journalism and new types of storytelling, one of them being data journalism, which I've been working on for the past since now 2012, that I've been working on data and computational journalism. And this data is crucial for data and computational journalism. So and this is changing our news cycle. So the sources have been enhanced. In the past, a good journalist would probably have a list of very credible sources that they could contact and get the story from. Now their sources have been enhanced. There's so much data out there that they could actually go and look into the source of where some statistics, for example, is coming from. And also there's many tools that we can now access and kind of get help from in processing that data and information that's out there accessible to us. Some of these tools now are the AI tools that are being used in the society, but also in the newsrooms. So I'm going to talk about how AI is being used in journalism and in newsrooms today. The title of this talk is Practical Aspects of AI in Newsrooms. So I'm not going to go into any sort of introduction of definitions of AI and generative AI, but I'm just going to show you a kind of list of some of the tools that I think many of you would be familiar with, ChatGPT being one of them. So ChatGPT 4.0 that has been very recently published, Gemini, Midjourney, and Dolly that are for Midjourney and Dolly for images. Then there was Copilot, Microsoft Copilot, that was again very recently published, and we have 11 Labs and Synthesia, for example, for audio and video. So these are some of the tools that many people are now experimenting with, playing around with, and are kind of starting to incorporate or implement in their day-to-day work or even personal lives. Just to very briefly kind of, if there is somebody in the audience who hasn't used generative AI tools, and I'm talking about generative AI mostly here because AI has been around for a really long time, for many years, and AI in the newsroom has also been around for quite some time, at least for 10 years in terms of its use in the newsroom. But what has changed now, suddenly with the use of ChatGPT and generative AI tools, AI has become something that everybody now uses. So in the past, when I was working with news organizations, either in terms of research or kind of R&D, helping them with R&D, it was a little hard to sell the idea of AI or computational journalism to them. And it was very slow uptake. Now, everybody's talking about AI. And that's why I'm focusing more on generative AI, because that has been kind of, that is now to some extent what people refer to AI when we talk about it. So here I'm going to tell ChatGPT to write a very short news article about Microsoft's new AI tool. And Microsoft's new AI tool is Copilot. ChatGPT is very clever, and it starts writing an article. So I'm going to pause here, and I'm going to let you read this article that ChatGPT has written. And it has dated it. I did it yesterday, so it has dated it. It even has a location, date of 28th of May. And it says Microsoft has launched the new groundbreaking tool. I'm just going to go back a little bit so you can see the name of the tool, named Microsoft Synapse AI. So if you continue reading, this piece of news article seems so realistic and so well written that even I was a little bit like, is that another new tool that I'm not familiar with? It has contact information, media relations, even phone number and email address. But if you go and look at it, this Synapse, I'm actually not 100% sure how this is pronounced. This is another tool. This is an analytics tool that they have. Doesn't have an AI on it or as part of it. It's a Microsoft Analytics tool that it has been in operation for quite some time. So it has been very clever. It has gone and put together some information that it has had. The phone number, I don't believe it is right. I searched it to make sure if it is right or wrong. It doesn't seem to be right. And the email address also is made up. So overall, it is a very well-written article that if somebody doesn't pay a lot of attention to some of the details, may not know if it is truthful or not. But at the end of the day, there's many hallucinations and made-up content. in it. So here we can see how dangerous it could be to use ChatGPT in the news context or in any sort of knowledge production context, at least now that it's not completely up to date. It is still working on trained material that goes back in time. At the moment, I believe the 4.40 version is October 2023, and the original training was 2021. So moral of the story here, as we can see, it is very, very good in language, but it's not very good in knowledge. So if we want to use ChatGPT for its language abilities, it is really good and we should definitely do it. However, we should be very careful and probably not use it for its knowledge abilities, at least when it comes to current events and happenings. But it's not all bad. It's not all that scary in a sense. I want to show you another example that you might find it fascinating about the kind of capabilities that it has. So here I've asked ChatGPT, I've given ChatGPT an image, and I've asked what's going on in this picture. I'm just going to give you a second to have a look at the picture to kind of make sense of it and see what's happening there. And as a human, I want you to try to give you an answer. So I'm just going to pause for maybe 30 seconds to give you the time. Okay, so this is the response that ChatGPT gave me. I mean, the image, I put it on the slide again, just as a reference point. It says, in this picture, a meerkat is standing on a digital scale and appears to be interacting with a person holding a clipboard. The meerkat looks like it is participating in some sort of a checkup or measurement process, possibly at a zoo or wildlife sanctuary. The person with the clipboard is likely recording the meerkat's weight or other health metrics. The scene is both humorous and endearing, as the meerkat looks engaged and almost as if it is cooperating with the weighting procedure. So I find this fascinating, the way ChatGPT has looked at this image, and it has found all sorts of objects on the image. And not only that, it has described the kind of relationship between these different objects and put it in a context that it is probably some sort of a health measurement. There's a clipboard, there's a person, and the meerkat is cooperating with the weighting procedure. So this, I think, shows us how kind of gives us some imaginary ideas of perhaps what we can do with such tools in our kind of procedures. This image was taken from a New York Times article. And they had a kind of series of articles, which the title was "What's Going On in This Picture?" And they asked students, their teachers and parents maybe, to describe in comments section what was going on in this picture. So this is kind of the description of what they ask. And then the comments, I'm going to allow you to, again, have a look at the comments. The comments are quite similar to what ChatGPT did. And some of them are very brief. Some of them kind of provide a little bit more detail into what is happening in this image. For example, this one has more detail, grabbing on the clipboard. That one is actually quite similar to what ChatGPT wrote. Interestingly enough, some of the people who commented thought this was an AI-generated image. So that also kind of shows already the mindset of people that whatever you show them, they're going to think it is AI generated. So somebody says the clipboard says London Zoo. And then New York Times itself kind of gives this story behind the scene. It doesn't kind of give a lot of description on the image, but it says it is actually in a zoo and there's measurements and so on. The zookeepers are doing measurements. So again, just putting a picture in ChatGPT, we can get so much information from it. And you might have already seen on the news, for example, that the Copilot also is able to, as you kind of turn around your phone, for example, it is able to remember the objects that it has seen. And then if you've lost your glasses, you can say, where's my glasses? And then it can tell you it is on the desk underneath your laptop or monitor, for example. So there's a lot of capabilities there and strength there that could be used. Now, how can we use them in journalism and in the news industry, and how is it being used? So I have a kind of list of types of scenarios and tasks that we can use AI in the news. This was originally written as part of a paper that I co-authored a couple of years ago, actually, before generative AI, or before at least ChatGPT was released. And then I've kind of added little by little certain new kind of tasks or activities into it, but it is to a large extent unchanged. So this is a small slide. I'm going to go slide by slide and focus on each of these categories of content discovery, investigative analysis, semantic linking and contextualization, production and storytelling, publishing and distribution, and preservation and archiving, that now I have kind of in the next slides, I've put it as part of semantic linking and contextualization just to save some time, because they are very, very much related. So in terms of content discovery, I think a lot of you would have some ideas of how generative AI could be used for content discovery. Whether it should or not at the moment, it is an important question to keep in mind. What content is it that we are trying to discover? And have we, for example, trained a GPT or an AI tool on our own content or the type of content that we want to use? Or are we just using for its knowledge capabilities? But again, this area is moving very, very fast. And yes, today, content discovery, sometimes yes, sometimes no, but 5 years from now, probably definitely is one of the big areas that AI would be used for. One of the other things is newsworthiness assessment, because it has a kind of a really good historical memory, in a sense, that it could help us to assess the newsworthiness. Again, if that connection to the real up-to-date data is stronger in the future, that would be more useful. Fact-checking and verification, it is already being used for fact-checking and verification, but by some organizations. So that is already a kind of a very good use of AI. Investigative analysis, newer versions of generative AI, and AI, again, is not only generative AI. Different AI tools are becoming very, very, or much stronger in data analysis. And now you can drop a CSV file or a spreadsheet to ChatGPT. If you have a paid version, I believe, I'm not sure if you can do it in the free version, and you can say, calculate the correlation analysis between this column and this column, and it's going to take a few seconds, and it will calculate the correlation analysis. It can find the outliers for you, and it can even run much more complex statistical analysis for you. You can even start talking to it and say, I have this types of data, this is a number of kind of variables, or this is a number of observations that I have in my data. What should I do for analyzing this variable versus that other variable, which are of certain types? And it will help you, and it will tell you what type of statistical tools, tests you need to use, or you can use. If you want it to do it for you, it will do it for you. If you want it to give you a Python code to write it in Python, or an R code to write it in R, it will again do it for you, and will help you do that. So it is quite useful in investigative analysis, and it will become more and more useful, in my opinion, as different tools are built on top of this tools. Then we have semantic linking and contextualization, which is probably one of the older applications of AI. And like semantic linking, natural language processing and linking, entity detection, and so on, have been going on for over 10, 12 years. And semantic search also has been kind of an important area of research. But again, with the release of these tools, suddenly all of these have come to surface and everybody starts using them. Same with topic detection, linking to relevant background and stories and relevant data sources. Again, if you're kind of linking to the wild, to the web, it may not be very reliable, but if you have a kind of a GPT or the type of use of ChatGPT on some of the archival data that you have had or you have in your organization, or a set of archives that are, for example, linked to one another, then that would be very, very reliable. So it could be used very much in preservation and archiving, proper tagging of content, and even if there is no tagging, it has the capabilities to go and find very relevant information for you in your archives and bring it to life. There are already news organizations that are doing very interesting work with their archives in terms of story creation, storytelling, relevant stories. Kind of, if you're writing a story about a president, for example, or a celebrity, they're using generative AI tools to go into their archives and create other stories based on verified information in their own archives for that person, celebrity, politician, or any other wildlife, anything that they may be writing about. And obviously, journalists are luckily still in the loop, and they will read it and modify it as they see fit and add it to their content. Production is one of the areas that is newer. A lot of people have been thinking about it, worrying about it, questioning whether or not AI is going to write articles and so on. And many AI experts in the past would have said, no, probably not, hopefully not, or not to a full extent. But now with the kind of developments around generative AI, this has become one of the new areas that AI is being heavily used in many different disciplines and kind of industries. In terms of news, we have story lead construction and recommendation, full story generation or draft of story generation, and narrative construction, automated writing. Summarization is one of the areas that is being used a lot now. So a news organization would write an article, say long form article, and then they use ChatGPT or different generative AI tools to summarize it. And they would even summarize it for different types of audiences. For example, they can say, summarize it for a young audience of this level of education or young audience of this specific demographic or characteristics, or summarize it for an audience who is familiar with data and normally reads, I don't know, the Financial Times, for example. And it is very good in doing that. Reformatting in the same vein, they are now using news organizations and other organizations to reformat content. And I'm going to show you an example a little bit later. But it is, for example, again, they write an article and then they use generative AI to produce audio version, one of the easier ones, or some of the news organizations are experimenting with creating video content, for example, from text that one of their journalists has written, or even comics and animations. So it's very, very interesting, this area, and a little bit more controllable because the original content is already produced by journalists or checked by the journalists, and now they're reformatting it for different scenarios. It could be used for visualizations in the production process, and again, the latest ChatGPT version is becoming quite good in that. Translation is one of the obvious use cases of ChatGPT or any AI tool, and it is actually very good if you use it for some of the languages that are not as commonly used, at least here in the West, for example. If you use Google Translate for it, they may not be very good, but if you use ChatGPT for it, it does much, much better compared to Google Translate. Subtitling is again another simple and obvious use case of some of these tools, but subtitling has been around for quite some time. It's just now faster and better. Publishing and distribution, again, we go back to that semantic kind of linking and annotation. We have audience engagement analysis that we could do. We could do sentiment analysis. One of the interesting things with the meerkats example that I put in ChatGPT was it could tell that the meerkat, it could tell us some sort of a sentiment here, that the image is humorous, the meerkat is cooperating. And I'm sure if I do it again, it might say, oh, it's looking at the camera and smiling at the camera. So it's very good in not only sentiment analysis in text, but even sentiment analysis from the image or probably from the audio. Personalizations and recommendations have been in practice now with different AI methods for quite some time. Newsletters are now becoming a kind of use case for the use of AI. I'm going to show you an example. Comment moderation again. It's very, very easy to moderate comments now with ChatGPT because it kind of understands what should be there, what shouldn't be there. You can train it and say, these are the types of comments that we accept. These are the types of comments that we reject. And it can very easily kind of gives you suggestions on what should be rejected and what should be accepted. And maybe if you could put even a threshold after testing and say, okay, if it is above this threshold, automatically reject. If it is lower than this threshold, show it to me, and then I'll decide. And same with SEO, it could be very useful. Okay. So these were some of the kind of list of things that we could do with AI in the news organizations. There have been quite a few studies and surveys on the use of AI in news organizations, specifically from 2019. LSE did the first survey on the use of AI in newsrooms. And then kind of it started progressing from there. The AP did another survey on the use of artificial intelligence in local news in 2022, 2023. We've had another survey by LSE, and then recently in 2024, AP published another survey on specifically on the use of generative AI in journalism. I know Reuters Institute also publishes surveys, so I just looked, and the latest survey is on public use of generative AI, or public opinion of the use of AI and generative AI in the news, which I encourage you to read. It is very, very interesting. So some kind of insights from the surveys that are out there specifically about the use of AI in newsroom is this one is from the LSE one in 2023, which asks how AI is being used in newsrooms now. And as you can see, news production, news gathering, and news distribution, already AI last year was being used heavily in news organizations for these purposes. 90% of respondents said they were using it for news production. 80% said it's for news distribution. So this is already very encouraging when we look at the respondents of these surveys. Again, there could be a bias. People who are more interested in the use of AI could take part in these types of surveys, but it is very encouraging. This one is from the other survey. So if you look at the colors, the blue ones are about the generative AI one, and the other one are about general use of AI in newsrooms. So the generative AI one is 2024 and asks about current routines or experimental usages of generative AI in newsrooms. And again, content production, specifically text, was where generative AI at the moment of the survey, which is around early 2024, being used the most. Information gathering and sense making, 21%. Content production, multimedia, 20% said they're using it. The business sector was using it quite significantly. And then for translation, working with data, transcription, coding, and so on, there were some people who were using generative AI in the newsroom. So again, this kind of gives us an idea of where AI, or specifically generative AI, can be used in the news and is already being used in the news. The journalists were asked about the aspirational use of generative AI, and what was quite interesting was that the aspirational use of generative AI and what they were using it for at that time was quite close. Now, I don't know if it is hard to imagine the types of uses of technology where we haven't quite seen or where we haven't quite used. That's maybe why their aspirational use and what they were using for are quite similar, but these are the types of imaginations that they thought they had, at least in relation to what was proposed to them in the survey. Now I'm going to give you kind of a bit of a story of a project that I was part of. This was called the Applied AI in Journalism Challenge. It was run and funded by the Open Society Foundations. It was a competitive accelerator for AI in small newsrooms mainly, but also medium newsrooms. It kind of was built on a learning by doing model. It had quite low barriers to entry, or the idea of it was to have low barriers to entry, which would advantage smaller newsrooms, or at least that was our hope in the process. Anybody could apply as long as the kind of part of the newsroom or the kind of section that they were working in was smaller than 30 people. And we generally encourage applications from outside of the UK, US, and Western Europe. So we wanted to kind of go a little bit outside the global north, in a sense, and encourage application of AI in other regions, in smaller, more independent news organizations. The objectives of the project or the program was to have pragmatic uses of AI in the newsroom, because this was a very short time. It was from July to November. Within this, to actually early November, within this short time span, they needed to go from zero to the end product or project that they had. So it had to be pragmatic and achievable. But at the same time, it had to be transformational. So they needed to be a bit imaginative with the type of work they wanted to do. So we were interested in new workflows, new products, new types of journalism, anything new that they could come up with in terms of the ideas, and being transformational in the context of their newsroom, at least. And AIJC kind of sat in between these two aims. To give you kind of a brief overview of how this worked, the application was open for a relatively short time, a couple of weeks, if I'm not mistaken. 113 applicants applied. We were looking for scrappy, small digital native newsroom type organizations. After the selection process, 12 participants or 12 organizations were selected to take part in this program. They were given a very small amount of funding. And then I'm going to explain how it worked. But then at the end, we had 5 finalists that in October we chose. The 5 finalists would go to the final event in Thailand. And then the winner would get 20K award. And there was one winner. In terms of geographical distribution of the organizations that were involved, we had Rappler and Puma Podcast from Philippines. We had The Conversation from Indonesia. The Indonesian section of The Conversation was involved. We had Initium from China. We had Radio Zamaneh, which is based in Amsterdam, but it serves Iran in Persian language. We had Daraj and Rasif 22 in Lebanon, Rubrika, an Ukrainian organization, and Medusa, an exiled Russian organization based in Latvia, Scrolla in South America, Agencia Pública in Brazil, and Cuestión Pública in Colombia. So it was quite spread all around the world, which made it very, very interesting in terms of the kind of types of ideas that were coming to us in the project. So what we worked, we have a hand raised here. I don't know if we do the question. I think we do the questions at.
Yeah, please use the Q&A function and we'll come to your questions soon. Thank you.
All right. So what happened here with these organizations? Again, I'm going to talk about it a little bit more later, but they got ongoing mentorship and a bit of education. I'm going to show you some examples first, and then I'm going to come back to it and kind of explain a little bit more what happened within this process as we were working with these news organizations. So these are some of the really interesting applications of AI in newsrooms from teams that were not AI savvy. So one of the examples is Zamaneh Media and Newsletter Hero project. So 2 editorial members of the team were involved. They wanted to work on newsletter, mainly because their website or their publication is mainly filtered in Iran, and they seem to be able to kind of communicate to their audience better through newsletter, or that's one of the ways that they communicate. So the newsletter is quite central for them, but they didn't have resources. The two people who were part of it, they had zero AI skills when they began, but when they ended, they actually could produce a tool that did a very interesting job that I'm going to tell you. So the tool basically would go and look into what was published on Zamane website in terms of articles, and then it would decide what would be suitable for newsletter, and it would kind of make a short list. It would create summarization of the project. It would create a teaser, and then it kind of would give you a draft of the newsletter and would ask the journalist at the end to say yes, no, or make some final adjustments and changes, and then send it to their audience. They were very successful in doing this. What they said was something that took them normally 5 to 8 hours manually or without AI. Now, at that time, they did an A/B test a few times, a few rounds, and they said on average, it takes them 1 hour and 20 minutes with Newsletter Hero AI tool that they had created. It was mostly based on prompt engineering between the two editorial members that were involved. And then from there, they thought they can start creating topical newsletters. They could start recommendations or personalized newsletters for different segments of their audience, or based on kind of the topics that they would show interest. And even they thought maybe at some point they can kind of move on to paid content. Another example is Agência Pública from Brazil. They were very good. They kind of used it for summarization and so on. But one of the things that they did was for audio. They used one of their kind of known personalities, radio personality in Brazil. And they had a contract with her and used her voice to train their own AI kind of voice system on her voice. And then for every piece that they published, she would kind of read the news to the audience, like in a podcast type manner. I don't
Só
know.
entra autoajuda e Bíblia. Presídios barram literatura para detentos por Leandro Aguiar, publicado por Agência Pública em 29 de fevereiro de 2000.
So I don't know if anybody speaks Portuguese here, but it was done really, really well. And it was already published on their website, and they also came up with AI guidelines. They were very transparent in how they've used AI in their kind of workflows, and all of them were already published and used on their website before the kind of November, October time that the project came to an end. Rappler was another one. They came up with the name TLDR. They created an entirely new channel based on their existing content for young audience. So they would kind of reformat the content that they had in kind of TikTok style pieces, but every now and then, so they could have celebrity content, but every now and then they would kind of put some very serious content in between them for their and then so they also experimented with comic generation, or automated or semi-automated comic generation using AI from the content that they had, which was really interesting experiment. And they were kind of, when we get to November, October, November, they were already somewhat quite interesting with that, and they were continuing their work on that. They also had summarization of their content and very, very well-developed guidelines on the use of artificial intelligence already on their website. They were the final winners of the contest. Another interesting project was by Question Publica. It was a little bit different to the other projects because Question Publica is an investigative journalism, independent investigative journalism organization in Colombia. They already had a lot of structured data that they had put together from different data journalism or investigative data journalism projects that they've had in the past. They do quite deep dives, especially on politicians, and they had recorded loads and loads and loads of stories, entities, topics in this kind of structured forms. on spreadsheets. What they wanted to do now is when an event is happening, they wanted the AI to be able to go in those kind of content in terms of entities and the links to the stories and create a new thread of story with a bit of a historical context with regards to the story that was being developed. So they had a project called We Know What You Did Last Legislative Period that had all these kind of different entities. And from there, they kind of came up with this workflow that they would kind of give the new topic or new story in their system, and it would go through the whole workflow. They had few-shot learning in their system. They would link it to their kind of structured data. They used ChatGPT for it, and then at the end, they created a set of kind of breaking news type tweet threads in their own tone, because apparently it is written in Spanish. They have quite a sarcastic tone when they write, and after training their system, the system was able to mimic their sarcastic tone in the kind of tweet threads that it was generating, and they would have a final look at the threads and they could change or approve and send it, publish it. In their case also, their work went down from 3 hours to 15 minutes, which was very, very significant. So to come back to how we did it, mentorship was a core key part of this program, and they received an initial training on AI with LSE Journalism AI that was specifically built for this cohort of participants. But then they had weekly meetings with the two mentors, that was myself and David Caswell, who's an AI and newsroom consultant. And the two of us would meet with the teams for a few months, and we would go through project idealization and then project development and ongoing brainstorming, coaching, and advising on how to go ahead with the project and what to change and what not to change. And that proved to be a really interesting model within a very short time frame that the project had. From July, really from August, the team started kind of coming up with the idea of their project, to October, which they kind of had to have their first iteration of the product, because the shortlisting was happening in October. So if anyone is interested in kind of doing a fast-paced, quick accelerator type project, I would strongly recommend looking into this mentorship model. Loads and loads of details about this program is included in this report that is published at the end of the project. It is a 60-page report, all the details about the projects, about how it worked and how it didn't work is there. If you want to go ahead and get ideas from it or try to replicate it and so on, you're very welcome to go and have a look at it and have a read. Also, if you have any questions or if you wanted to brainstorm or have a chat, feel free to get in touch. Very quickly, I'm going to go to challenges, concerns, and some of the ethical considerations when it comes to the use of AI in newsrooms, and then I'm going to close it for question and discussion. Not surprisingly, one of the most pressing challenges for AI integration in newsroom are technical challenges, followed by ethical challenges. So luckily, many journalists are now aware of the ethical challenges that could be involved and worried about it, as they should be. In terms of generative AI specifically, they seem to be worried about no human supervision and inaccurate information and bias, all of which are very, very important. So this was a question on strategies to ethical use of AI, and the highest proportion of journalists said the solution is not using it, which I don't believe is going to be a solution very soon, because everybody seems to be or need to use it. But then it's verifying information, guidelines, ethical and legal framework, and oversight. I'm not going to talk about AI and misinformation, but it's a topic that everybody is aware of, and we did a policy briefing about it at Surrey, that if you're interested, you can go and have a look at. It was like very short, coming up with some ideas on how to avoid it, especially in the year of elections that we are in at the moment. And that's the QR code to the report if you're interested to go and have a look at. Kathleen mentioned BBC Braid Fellowship in the beginning. So this is a project that I've just started with the BBC, and half of my time will be kind of dedicated to this. And I'll be working with the BBC on enhancing responsible AI literacy at the BBC and beyond. So while we will start with the BBC, my hope is that whatever we come up with, we will study outside of the BBC to see how others, in terms of AI literacy, how it is going on and how it could be kind of integrated within the whole workflow of AI in a newsroom. And hopefully the results will be useful for the wide journalism community. If you have any questions or if you have interest in this area, please do get in touch. That's it. I'm going to stop sharing.
Just before you stop sharing, Bahareh, I wanted to ask you a question about the slide, current experimental usage of AI. It was about halfway.
The aspirational one.
The one just before the aspirational one.
Oh, okay, right.
Because interestingly, they were quite similar. This one, current routine. As an expert in this field, where do you wish these lines were? Where, if you were running a media organization, where would you like to see the emphasis on experimental usage in your newsroom?
Right, interesting question. So in terms of what is being presented here, I think I would also be mostly excited with content production, but text is now probably for me not the most exciting one at the moment, even though it is very, very useful. But for me would be the multimedia, like audio. Again, it's relatively simple. There's a lot of issues with audio because it makes it extremely difficult to verify. With text, we have things to look for. With video, we have clues to look for. With audio, it becomes extremely difficult. So that's kind of a whole new area. But video is interesting. And working with data for me also is quite interesting to see how structured data, especially because this is all about learning from this unstructured world of text. And I think for me, especially coming from kind of a data journalism background, I'm interested to do experiments with working with data for storytelling. And
perhaps hand in hand with that, the coding.
With the what? Sorry?
Perhaps hand in hand with that, coding.
Coding, yes. That is an area that I think will. A lot of developers are already experimenting with it, and I think a lot of the developers are now doing part of their coding with ChatGPT or tools similar. And I think that will make engaging with some of these coding tools easier for the journalists. But at the same time, because ChatGPT does the work for you, you may or may not need to engage with coding. It's going to be a lot of interfaces, or you can just, instead of wanting to write the code, you can write it in natural language, give it the files, and it will do it for you. So at some level, coding is all about how to formalize that natural language. And already we're getting to a point that we don't need to formalize it so much, maybe.
Yeah, it's just really interesting that the stuff that was so exciting in the experiment that you ran, the live experiment with newsrooms, is not as weighted as this chart. There wasn't really, content production wasn't the exciting thing that we saw coming out of that conference.
That's right, but a lot of them were already, the first thing that they started thinking about was content production.
Yeah. Okay, so step one. A question from Joydeep. If we're starting from zero and want to introduce AI into our newsroom, and maybe you've already started answering this, where would you suggest that we get the training to introduce and practice using AI?
There is a lot of training happening out there now. I mean, depends which maybe country you are. Some places there are actually physical training that you can take part in. For example, in New York, I know there's a new program. In the terms of online, the Journalism AI runs a yearly program on kind of AI and journalism, but so many more courses are popping up. We run one in Surrey on kind of people-centered AI, but that's kind of more of a postgraduate course, and pretty much every other university, I think, is doing it. But there's loads of free online content out there that if you look for, hopefully.
Joydeep, if you want to update us with what country you're writing from, maybe we can. I'm based in India. Anything interesting happening in India in terms of training that's on your radar?
Not that I know of specifically, but I think some of these initiatives that are providing training are actually quite interested in journalists coming in from diverse backgrounds and different countries. So it is worth keeping an eye. But again, also there's quite a lot of free material out there that you can kind of look for and use this regardless of which country you are located in.
And play is...
Yes, that is the most important thing, actually. One of the things that the participants of our program did was play around, come up with a project idea, start playing with ChatGPT and prompt engineering. Engineering sounds like such a complex word, but just prompt writing. Try to write prompts, read about writing prompts, drop your files in there and see where you get. And you'd be surprised, within a month or two, you're going to be able to do so much just writing text in ChatGPT that you would not be able to imagine before starting to do that.
Bruno Jeffrey has a good follow-on question. He wants to start training an AI to write article drafts in his style, vocab, and tone. What AI tools would you recommend he start that experimentation with?
ChatGPT. Very easy. I mean, my suggestion normally is don't think about complex AI tools. Just use the simplest ones that you have access to and start experimenting with it. Yeah, and there is few shot learning, so you can train ChatGPT, keep giving it the type of writing that you would write or the type of writing that you would like to write in that style. And after a while, it will start writing in your style. The Question Publica, for example, and Zamanet, they both had their own language, literally language, but also their own tone. And they just used ChatGPT and they trained ChatGPT. And Zamanet, for example, they didn't do any coding. It was just interacting with the ChatGPT itself. Later on, they might implement something, but at the moment, it's just,
There's a great 411 from Chepa Chapalala says Journalism AI is launching another iteration of its discovery course, a 6-week introductory course. Anyone can sign up. Information will be on our website next week. Chepa, that's the LSE website. If you want, pop the URL in and I'll move it across to chat. Question again here, following on really and building on Bruno's question, from Sonali Verma, who says, what kind of team is required if you have a small newsroom who want to start experimenting? How many people, what kind of skills, what kind of roles would you recommend?
Nothing, just people who are interested. Again, like Zamane, there were 2 editorial people who were not full-time on this. They had just a portion of their time. Just 1 person, 2 person who's interested, just try to experiment and then try to show it to your colleagues and buy in their interest, and ideally your editor. And ideally, they would give you more and more time as they see you are creating something that could save time or create better content. So just start doing it. Don't wait for a team or a tool or a time.
Yeah, or a groundbreaking manual that will be out of date in 2 weeks' time.
Exactly.
Juan Ferro says, have you had anyone from journalism schools approaching to understand how they need to adapt their training?
Yes, I mean, I do talk to a lot of journalism schools. I'm an academic after all. So there is a lot of conversation going on how AI should be integrated. Some of them are faster, some of them are slower. I actually did a study of data journalism and journalism programs quite a few years ago, 2017. And we can see how fast we have moved, because in 2017, my study was showing that there's not a lot of data courses, or there's not enough data courses around the world. I even had a map of data courses that was available out there. And now a lot of journalism schools, surprisingly, even more than data, they are looking into how to incorporate AI. Many of them haven't done it yet, but they're definitely thinking about it. You're muted, I think.
Thank you. I am muted. There was an airplane. I'm going to pop downstairs to our journalist fellows, and let's start with Sina, if we can. You want to go ahead and ask your question? Link for Chepa's program in the chat for those.
Oh, sorry. Hi.
Hi,
Thank you
Sina.
so much for a great talk. I was just interested in knowing what kind of legislation do you think is necessary, if any, for regulating this area, for example, from the EU?
What sort of installation? Did you say?
Legislation.
Legislation. This is a hard, this I'm sure needs a talk on its own. And we can see how different countries are already kind of going around the topic. The EU has been the first and probably the most strict in terms of legislation to kind of require that everybody would need it. The UK has been much more relaxed in terms of an innovation approach. I don't have a strong opinion there. I think I lean more towards the EU style because it is important for me to make sure AI is safe and ethical. But again, there are some counter arguments about innovation from the likes of UK and US, or the kind of arguments that they have that if we don't do it, China will do it and we won't be able to catch up with them. So yeah, my opinion, closer to the EU types of legislation, but yeah.
And let's go to Osama from Iraq.
Salam khair mamnoon. My name is Osama Boki. I'm from Iraq, Kurdistan. My question is, I think you also touched upon that, but like, for other languages, I'm Kurdish. And of course, like, it's very difficult to just catch up with the development elsewhere in the West. We just were able to have a tool to read text. We are still developing one to transcribe audio. So what do you think, how this is going to work, forward, how this divide is going to narrow down in the future, perhaps for other languages? I know Kurdish is, in our case, it has been very, very difficult. It took the locals to somehow try to help and develop the tools, whereas of course, in English, you'd have it it's taken for granted.
I'm just going to paraphrase that question because the sound might be bad for our audience. Osama is from Iraqi Kurdistan. He says it's kind of one thing to talk about translation improving in some languages, but in others, it seems to be very, very far behind. Where do you even begin experimenting with AI translation?
Yeah, first, you're welcome. And I know Kurdish is, I don't know Kurdish, but I've seen experimentation with Persian, and I I'm able to read Persian. I know it does much better. The likes of ChatGPT work much, much better with Persian language or some other languages that are not as commonly used as English, Spanish, and so on, or not commonly worked on or invested on. So with I think here two things could happen. One is because of its language ability and because it can train itself over time, it will get better and better with all languages because we don't need to do a lot with it. It just can go and read it. The second side of the story for me is that the digital divide that it could create, because there's going to be more and more and more content on English, French, Spanish. And this divide on training can get bigger and bigger, not only on translation and languages, but any sort of divide from people who can access, because I know in certain countries that are under different sanctions, for example, and they can't even access ChatGPT or certain AI tools. So there is potential for more equal world, but at the same time, there is potential for a larger digital divide, in my opinion. Which direction we go, hopefully the more equal, but I don't know.
Do you mind if we go a couple of minutes over time for one? I'm going to combine a question from Federica with a question from myself. What news organization do you think is streets ahead on this stuff? And what sources are you using to stay informed on this topic? Who should we be following?
What news organizations? I'm a bit hesitant to name a news organization.
Yeah, I don't want to shoot you in the foot here.
Yeah, because I think many news organizations are doing very interesting work, and I am particularly encouraged by smaller news organizations who, before the likes of ChatGPT, didn't have the resources or access to kind of use AI or create some experimental or actually really exciting tools and use cases. So yeah, I'm a little hesitant to name any single news organizations. In terms of sources, it is really hard to actually stay on top of it. I think Reuters Institute is one of the good sources to follow. Journalism AI is a good source to follow. Then there are people like Nick Diakopoulos, the people who are working in the AI Media and Democracy Lab in the Netherlands, and my colleagues at the People-Centered AI Institute. There's really a lot of people who do really interesting work in different countries. The issue is that a lot of focus comes again back to the global north, and I would like to encourage focusing more a little bit on the global south, because so much interesting work is going on there. And when you look at some of the project, actually some of the ideas that we get from countries other than UK, Europe, and the US, you see that they're much more imaginative than what we might think of here.
Scrappy.
Yes, exactly.
And it's exactly as you said in your presentation, that, you know, the scrollers, the Agências Públicas, the scroll-ins, these are the small scrappy outlets that have, ironically, the resource to play because they're small enough not to run into red tape. Great. Thank you very, 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 very much for all of your time, and for being a person who makes engaging presentations. This is hard to find in the academic world, so we appreciate it.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you very much for inviting me.
Thank you, Dr. Bahareh. Go well and best of luck. I'll definitely get you back to talk about the results of that braid experiment, where we'll be watching.
That would be, yes, very interesting to watch, and I'm excited about it. Very nice meeting you all, and keep in touch.
Go well. Bye.
Bye-bye.